Mark and Laura Rivers seemed like the perfect young parents, but behind closed doors, their 6-week-old twins were suffering in ways no one could have imagined. What really happened in their quiet home? This shocking true crime story will reveal the terrifying events that turned a loving family's life upside down. Mark Rivers had always been the kind of man people trusted without question. In the small town where he taught math at the local high school, he was known for his patience, his calm demeanor, and his sharp intelligence. Students often described him as kind and approachable, someone who could make even the most complicated equations feel understandable. Outside the classroom, he appeared equally devoted, a loving husband to his wife Laura and a new father to twin babies, Ethan and Emma, born just 6 weeks ago. On the surface, life seemed perfectly ordinary. The family lived in a modest, neatly kept home on a quiet street, where neighbors waved from their porches and children played under watchful eyes. For the first few weeks after the twins were born, the household operated like clockwork. Laura spent her days attending to the infants' needs, feeding, burping, and comforting them, while Mark balanced late-night grading with careful observation of the babies' schedules. Friends and neighbors who visited often commented on how serene the house felt. It was easy to assume everything was peaceful and healthy. But the reality inside the home began to shift in subtle ways that went unnoticed at first. Small, almost imperceptible signs began to emerge. Ethan would wake up crying at unusual hours, more intensely than typical infant fussiness. Emma occasionally displayed sudden flinches, tiny movements that seemed sharper than normal. Laura, exhausted and overwhelmed, initially chalked these moments up to normal newborn behavior. Bruises appeared on the baby's arms and legs, faint enough that they could have been explained away as normal bumps or accidental knocks. But each mark left her uneasy, planting tiny seeds of doubt in her mind. Meanwhile, Mark's demeanor at work began to change in ways that colleagues noticed but didn't fully understand. The teacher who once radiated calm and patience became increasingly withdrawn. He spent longer hours in his classroom, sometimes staring at papers without writing anything, his thoughts seeming distant. Students sensed the shift too. The energy in the room was different, heavier. While no one could articulate exactly what was wrong, the tension in his presence was palpable. At home, the calm thawed remained for now. Mark played with the twins during brief periods of lightness, and Laura clung to the normalcy that masked her growing fears. Yet beneath that quiet, ordinary life, a tension was building. It was the kind of tension that doesn't announce itself with drama but grows quietly, feeding off small irregularities, subtle patterns, and unspoken suspicions. By the end of the 6th week, the serene picture of Mark Rivers and his young family had begun to fray, and the first real questions about what was happening behind closed doors were starting to take root. Laura's unease grew with each passing day. At first, she tried to dismiss the bruises on Ethan and Emma as minor, harmless accidents, the kind that newborns seem to accumulate without explanation. But the marks were appearing more frequently, always in places that didn't make sense. One evening, as she held Ethan in her arms, she noticed a faint purple shadow along his thigh. Her chest tightened. It wasn't the soft, accidental bump that could happen during play. It looked deliberate, too defined, too precise. She felt a knot of fear that refused to unravel. Sleep-deprived and anxious, Laura began documenting every bruise, every odd cry, and every unusual movement. She took careful notes and photographs, storing them in a folder on her phone. The pattern was unsettling. Bruises appeared mostly when Mark was alone with the twins. Late night feedings, nap times, even moments when Laura stepped away briefly all seemed to coincide with the Mark's appearance. Her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. She loved Mark, the man who had once seemed devoted and gentle. Could he really be capable of harming their children? The possibility was terrifying, almost impossible to accept. Despite her fear, Laura found herself watching Mark more closely than ever. Every movement he made with the twins was analyzed, every touch scrutinized. She noticed the smallest gestures, the way he adjusted their clothing, how he lifted them, even how he held their tiny bodies. Something felt off, though she couldn't yet pinpoint what. Friends and family offered advice, but Laura's fear was private, gnawing at her from the inside. She didn't want to accuse Mark without proof, yet her maternal instincts screamed that something was wrong. One day, while changing Emma's diaper, Laura felt a sudden surge of panic. A new bruise, slightly raised and redder than before, appeared on Emma's shoulder. Her hands shook as she tried to comfort the baby, her mind spinning with questions. The serene life she had imagined for her family seemed impossibly distant. She thought about calling someone, reaching out for help, but doubts held her back. If she was wrong, the accusation could shatter their lives. If she was right, waiting could make things worse. In the quiet of the night, Laura stared at the twins sleeping side by side, their tiny chests rising and falling. She realized that time was slipping away, that the safety of her children could no longer be taken for granted. The decision weighed heavily on her, forcing her to confront a terrifying reality. The peaceful home she had once cherished was now a place of tension and dread, a fragile setting where love and fear coexisted uneasily. Something had to be done, and she knew that ignoring the signs any longer was no longer an option. The tension that had quietly built over weeks finally erupted one morning, when Laura took Ethan and Emma for their routine checkup at the pediatrician's office. What had once seemed like ordinary visits now carried a weight she could no longer ignore. The doctor's expression changed as he examined the twins, his brow furrowing with concern. He noticed bruises, tiny broken capillaries, and marks that were unusual for infants so young. His words were careful but firm, hinting at the possibility of physical abuse. Laura felt her stomach tighten as a wave of dread washed over her. Authorities were contacted, and soon investigators arrived to assess the situation. They were calm, professional, and methodical, but their presence filled the house with a heavy tension. They observed quietly, asking questions in measured tones, examining the home and the twins without revealing their full suspicions. Mark continued his routines during these visits, teaching, grading, and preparing lessons as if nothing had changed. To anyone outside, the family's life still appeared ordinary, but the atmosphere inside the home had shifted. Every glance, every gesture, every small movement felt loaded with scrutiny. As investigators collected evidence, Laura began to feel a mix of relief and fear. Relief that someone was taking her concerns seriously, fear at the possibility that the person she trusted most, her husband, could be the source of the harm. Each bruise, each unexplained mark, seemed to scream a silent accusation. She questioned herself constantly. Had she been wrong to suspect him? Or had her instincts finally recognized a horrifying truth that no one else wanted to see? Medical examinations confirmed that the injuries were significant and inconsistent with normal infant accidents. Each tiny mark was meticulously documented, forming a disturbing pattern. Investigators noted that the bruises' locations and severity suggested intentional harm rather than carelessness. The revelation was shocking and surreal. Laura's world shifted in a single moment. The safe, quiet life she had once known had been replaced by uncertainty and fear. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues began to sense the tension, whispers spreading quietly through the community. The image of Mark Rivers as a patient, devoted teacher and father collided with the growing suspicion surrounding the infant's injuries. Even as investigators worked to uncover the truth, the household was trapped in a strange limbo, a mix of daily routines, professional duties, and the invisible weight of accusations that could change everything. Laura held the twins close, feeling both a protective urgency and an emotional exhaustion that refused to ease. The first shock had arrived, and with it, the reality that the life they had known was no longer untouched by fear or suspicion. The investigation into the twins' injuries intensified, bringing a sense of unease that settled over the house like a shadow. Authorities meticulously examined every detail: medical records, home surroundings, and even Mark's past. Each new piece of information seemed to deepen the suspicion, painting a picture that was increasingly difficult to ignore. Laura watched as her home, once a place of comfort, transformed into a space heavy with scrutiny and quiet tension. Every corner, every hallway, every baby item seemed to carry an unspoken weight, a reminder that nothing could be taken for granted. Investigators noticed patterns in Mark's behavior that had previously gone unexamined. Surveillance footage captured fleeting, unusual moments: Mark entering rooms at odd hours, handling the twins in ways that appeared abrupt or tense. While nothing in isolation proved guilt, the combination of incidents raised serious questions. Authorities also reviewed his history as a teacher and mentor. They uncovered a prior incident in which a child under his supervision had been injured in what was officially labeled a minor accident. At the time, the school had dismissed it quietly, but in light of the current investigation, the incident took on a more ominous meaning. Mark maintained a composed exterior, denying all accusations and cooperating with the investigation. Yet cracks in his statements began to appear. Small contradictions and evasive answers drew the attention of detectives, adding to the growing unease. Friends and neighbors who had once seen him as kind and devoted began to whisper and speculate, their perceptions shifting under the weight of suspicion. The house, once filled with warmth and laughter, now echoed with silence, punctuated only by the soft cries and coos of the twins. Laura's emotions were a complex mix of fear, sadness, and uncertainty. She wanted desperately to protect her children, yet the man she had loved and trusted was at the center of the storm. The stress of constant observation and investigation weighed heavily on her, leaving her exhausted and anxious. She spent her days monitoring the twins closely, documenting every detail, and waiting for answers she wasn't sure she wanted to find. As the days passed, the tension became almost unbearable. Each examination, each interview, and each new piece of evidence seemed to pull the family deeper into a web of suspicion. What had once been a routine life, sleeping, feeding, and small family routines, was now overshadowed by fear and doubt. Behind closed doors, secrets were unraveling, and the line between perception and reality blurred. The once orderly world of Mark Rivers and his family was now fractured, leaving everyone involved questioning not only what had happened but who they could truly trust. The trial began with intense media attention, and the once quiet neighborhood was suddenly flooded with reporters and cameras. Mark Rivers, the calm and composed math teacher everyone thought they knew, now faced accusations that shook the community to its core. The courtroom was tense, every word measured, every gesture scrutinized. Laura sat in the front row, holding Ethan and Emma in her lap, torn between fear, hope, and exhaustion. The weeks of uncertainty, suspicion, and dread had led to this pivotal moment. Evidence was presented meticulously. Medical records, photographs of the bruises, and investigative reports painted a disturbing picture. Witnesses described the unusual patterns, the moments captured on surveillance, and the previous incidents at the school. It seemed overwhelming, the weight of suspicion pressing down not only on Mark, but on Laura, the twins, and everyone who had once trusted him. The narrative was clear, the injuries were deliberate, and the calm, ordinary life the family had known was a facade masking unspeakable acts. Then, a shocking twist changed everything. A second independent investigation revealed a critical detail that had been overlooked. Medical experts discovered that both Ethan and Emma suffered from a rare clotting disorder, a condition that made their tiny blood vessels exceptionally fragile. Bruises could appear spontaneously or from the slightest pressure, completely unrelated to intentional harm. The revelation stunned everyone in the courtroom. The evidence that had seemed so damning now had an entirely different explanation, one rooted in biology rather than malice. Mark was cleared of all charges, but the damage to his reputation was profound. Friends and neighbors struggled to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the weeks of accusations and fear. The community was left grappling with the discomforting reality that appearances can be deceiving, and even the most ordinary lives may hide complexities beyond observation. Laura, though relieved that Mark was innocent, felt a lingering unease. Weeks of fear and doubt had left marks on her psyche, a reminder that trust, once shaken, is not easily restored. The twins, unaware of the turmoil around them, grew healthy and strong under Laura's careful watch. The family slowly attempted to return to a sense of normalcy, but the shadow of those weeks remained. The story of Mark Rivers and his infants became a cautionary tale, a reminder of how fear and suspicion can escalate, how assumptions can mislead, and how the truth, when revealed, can be as shocking as any accusation. In the end, the family endured, but the experience left an indelible mark on their lives, a mixture of relief, reflection, and the haunting knowledge of how fragile trust can be.